Hey, I'm Debbie Levitt. Thanks for coming. This is DevOps ICU, improving DevOps results by correctly integrating UX. We're going to be talking mostly about UX, as that's my specialty. I don't know what it's called here, but in America, the ICU is the intensive care unit, the part of the hospital where patients are getting the most critical treatment for their care. So I know some people feel like their DevOps is in the ICU, or perhaps their relationship with UX. So I've been doing UX strategy, design, consulting, speaking, training since the mid-90s. Who remembers the mid-90s? A few? Good, thank you. Okay, sometimes people are like, I wasn't born yet. And I'm like, oh, when did that happen? So I've been doing this since 1995. It's been a while, and I love it. And I'll also be doing an afternoon keynote today. It's all bizarre, painful stories of trying to do UX with engineering and product people out in the real world. So come see me this afternoon as well. And so I also wanted to tell you my company is called P-Type, short for prototype, since we build a lot of UX prototypes. And I'm now based in Italy, so I am local to you guys. So when you take your sunny Sardinia summer vacation, come see me and write it off as a business trip and eat the pork and cheese. And also, what else was I going to mention? Yes, so P-Type is my agency, and we handle the full spectrum of UX work. If there's anything we can do for anybody, including working with companies to help them set up and improve UX teams and the process related there. We're also working with Agile coaches to get some of this information in there, because that seems to have been missed. So this session boils a 2-day workshop I wrote down to about an hour, which means I'm not going to cover everything as much as I'd like to, but I'm happy to take questions. If we don't have time at the end, I'll be here all day. And you can also send me a question through the Menti polling system. We're going to take a couple of fun interactive polls. I hope you guys will join in. And so that's menti.com. It's on the bottom of every slide. And if you ask me a question, just please include your email address so I can actually write you back. You'd be amazed how many questions I get with no email address, and then I can't write them back, and that's just kind of a UX moment. So I'm good, but I'm not that good. All right, so let's jump in. And of course, add me on LinkedIn. I say yes to people in my audiences. Also, this session is certainly tweetable, LinkedInable. I'm not sure anyone on your Facebook friends would care, but certainly tweetable, LinkedInable. There I'm DevOps ICU, and you can use the BastaCon hashtag that's out in the wild. And also, you ever watch a speaker and their slides are animating and you never know when their slides are done animating, so you don't know when to take a picture? Well, I've decided that when you see this, that means I'm not adding anything else to this slide, and it's a great time to take a picture if you're the type of person who likes to take pictures of slides. So look for the camera. And this is going to be a poll when it loads up, so anybody who wants to get involved, take out your phone and go to menti.com and then 88752. I just like to get an initial impression from people on things that they believe about UX, from hearing about UX, from working with UX. Obviously, the polls are optional, but they can be fun, but I see nobody taking out their phone, so it might be a slide we just move past. Anyone? Okay, 2 people have graciously thrown themselves into the ring. There will be a couple more later, so I hope people will get in the spirit. Come on, I'm allergic to caffeine and I'm like this. Come on, you guys can wake up more. Anyone? Tell me the truth now. Don't cover me in butter. Tell me the truth of your experience with UX. Excellent. We'll be talking about that. These are all things we'll be getting to in some short version today. Yes. I'm crying on the inside, but I'm smiling on the outside. Anyone else want to throw their opinion in here? 3 of you. I thank the 3 of you. I don't include any positive options, because if everyone loved everything about UX, there wouldn't be anything to tell you about other than how to work with them better. I mostly hear these. I don't hear the positive ones a lot, so if you have positive ones, I thank you already. All right, well, these are the things that I hear the most, and I'm hoping that I can get through a lot of these today, even though we're going to be focused more on how UX works into Agile and software development. So Great, back to slides. So I've been doing this talk around the world for the past few months, and some people had asked last year, is this just some sort of sales pitch for UX? And my answer is, well, that's kind of strange because you voluntarily came to a session about how UX works into processes. I don't have anything to sell you. You've already bought it. So no, not a sales pitch, not selling you a new car or a used car. So this is just some of the stuff I'm hoping to cover in the hour. So just a quick agenda. There are some slides about what is UX and what's the value of UX, just because I found at some of the engineering conferences people aren't as familiar with what UX really does. We're seen as being in a black box of mystery, so I do cover that a bit. So jumping in, so of course at many companies engineering is fed by other teams. There's somebody who's making blueprints and hopefully wireframes or prototypes. Somebody is laying this out and telling engineering what to build. They're not working in a vacuum. There should be collaborative processes with other people at the company. But too many companies are excluding or circumventing UX specialists because UX wasn't in their Agile training or the book they read about XP or some of these other things. And unfortunately, a lot of people believe that UX, as you saw in the earlier slide, isn't lean, isn't agile. They just waste time and budget. Anybody can do their job. They just draw boxes on a page. And of course, that's not true. Otherwise, you'd be doing the work. Because expert UX architects can research, design, test, and iterate on everything between someone saying, I have an idea, and let's get it to engineering to be built. So DevOps is about so much more than frameworks and infrastructure and things like that. When we think about how we're all trying to work together, certainly product designers and UX, we want to be involved with what engineering is doing, but that hasn't really been in the definition of DevOps. And I find that a lot of engineers want to be involved in what we're doing, but a lot of methodologies make it sound like you don't need to have engineering too involved in what the creative team is doing. So these are silos that we need to break down. Because all your customer sees is your user experience. That's it. They don't know if you had 1,000 developers. They don't know if you were lean or agile or used some other flavor of things. They only see what you've put out for them. And you're a user too. The systems you use, you've chosen between them. You've rejected some, you've chosen others. What made you choose the systems that you chose? And when you find a system that's difficult to use or doesn't work the way you want it to, are you thinking, I wonder how many sprints that took? Well, no. You're probably thinking, who built this piece of junk? And you'd be right. Who designed this? Who researched it? Who tested it with people like you? Was it even tested at all before it went out to the public? So these are questions you can ask yourself. And UX is driven by a lot of the same results that DevOps is looking for. We are problem finders, problem solvers, and customer advocates looking to focus on product quality and making sure there's that product market fit. We want to make sure teams are efficient, and of course we want to get easy to learn, easy to use, tell your friends it's fantastic products out to market as fast as possible. So enhancing this relationship should save time, money, and sanity. And let's take a more concrete look at your process. So if you're not working with UX now, as many of the people I speak to, they're often not working with UX, your process probably looks like this. You have an external client or a product manager or your CEO says, here's what I want, this is the vision. And then engineering goes and builds it, puts it on a server, and then wouldn't you know, someone sees it and goes, now that I see it, I think I want something different. And that means that you're going to have to cycle back and say, okay, now what do you want? Fine, we'll build it, we'll test it, we'll get it back on the server. And this seems to cycle around and around until someone says, well, just put it out there and let's see what users think of it. And of course, you cross your fingers, hope it's not a disaster, and hope you still have a job next week. But if you were working with UX, the process looks a little bit more like this. That person with the product vision comes to UX. UX works with that person on where there is customer value and where there might not be. UX does their research and designing and cycles through their processes, which I'll tell you about shortly. And then, of course, UX takes it to user testing. We always want to test things before having engineering build them so that you know you're building the right vetted thing once. So at that point, with everybody on board, we can bring in engineering. Well, not bring them in. We've hopefully been collaborating with you along the way, but send it over. And then that means if someone changes their mind, they come back to UX. They don't just put in engineering change requests. UX stays part of the process at every point, running interference for you guys. And that way, if there are changes of mind, we don't care because we've just been making wireframes and prototypes, and those are much easier to change than real code. So still okay to change your mind, though we'll probably try to talk them out of it. Can you smell that? That is the sweet smell of free conference food and of UX giving you documentation so that engineers only have to build it once. That would be my dream. Might be your dream. You tell me later. Okay, how does UX create such magic? Just a few slides on what we do, since I find when I speak to engineers, they usually aren't totally sure what UX does, and I often hear, you're the guys who A/B test it after we build it, right? And I'm like, no! So a few slides on this, just in case. So what is UX? It is the more scientific, psychological, and problem-solving side of product experience and service design. Our goals include happier, more loyal customers, ease of learning and use, shorter, more intuitive processes, and accessibility for people who might have vision, hearing, mobility, cognitive, and other issues. I know that's the law in America, in the US, in the UK. Is that law here where you have to build websites that are completely usable by people with ability issues? Is that law here yet? It probably will be at some point, as it is in other countries. So look for that. So, of course, we can think about happy and more loyal customers. We know what that looks like. Ease of learning and use, of course, a great example of that is the manual. Many products don't even come with them anymore, and when they do, we aren't reading them anyway. So things need to be built to be intuitive. That means when someone on a team says, well, just put more instruction text on that website and tell people what to do. You don't like to read instruction text. I don't like to read it. Nobody reads it. We have to build it to be intuitive. Instruction text is a hint that this wasn't very intuitive. Oh, my favorite. So, of course, shorter, more intuitive processes. How many fields would you like to fill out to get free Wi-Fi at a concert hall you might never go to again? Someone in the marketing department obviously decided this is a great time to get people's full home address, their birthday, their gender, and in my opinion, the types of questions you would answer for online banking security. But somehow this was just to get on the Wi-Fi during a concert in London. Of course, in this case, this person is not thinking of what a user would want. They're thinking of what the marketing department would want. And if you do that, you might lose the users, and then the marketing department won't have a job anyway. And quick accessibility notes, since a lot of people don't fully understand the weight of accessibility. This was an American football game a few years ago. Nike decided to get creative with the team uniforms, change them completely, put one team in all red and one team in all green. And people thought this was dynamic and interesting and really quite a shakeup. But people who were colorblind saw this. And a lot of them were tweeting, including former football players, I'm colorblind, I can't follow this game. And it was a bit of a controversy for Nike, who, of course, should have known a little bit better about different issues. And so it's important for us to be building websites for people with all types of accessibility needs. Okay, so quick thing about our process, and I want you to know a little bit about the UX process because it answers questions engineers ask me often like, what are you guys doing? And why is this taking so long? And do you really have to do all this stuff? And so I want to show you this, the short version of some of what UX does. It's called the user-centered design process. If someone's not doing this, please fire them because there kind of is no other approach at this time. So I don't know what they're doing if it's not this. And it basically starts with requirements and sometimes some auditing. And this means to me that this is the perfect time for UX to start working with engineering. We need to speak, of course we're speaking with product anyway, there's a close relationship there, but we need to start talking with engineering to make sure that what we're thinking of building is feasible for the time and resources that you have, but also for things like API calls and services. Do we have these available, or are you going to have to build them, and can you build them given the time and resources? So early collaboration is key. If your UX person isn't doing that, tell them to talk to me and I'll whip them into shape. Next, of course, we have research. Research is really key to the UX process. We need to fully understand the user. So we do research with real or archetypal customers so that we know what their needs, motivations, and habits are. Different than what marketing research is. We tend to research more of the psychology of people rather than what type of house they live in and how much money they make. So research is key because UX wants to know things like why and not just what. And information architecture is what we call the whole side of UX, and some people just specialize in this, and that has to do with structures, taxonomies, and hierarchies. So things like website and app navigation, or even some of the way a database and metadata might be set up so that people can easily find stuff on a site. Now, when you guys think UX, you're probably thinking interaction design and prototyping. Those are our wireframes and prototypes and all of our blueprints. But you can see there's so much more going on with UX. And if wireframes and prototypes are to be done well, they're normally informed by what came before them and what comes after them. So very rarely are wireframes being done isolated in a vacuum with nothing else, unless you've hired the wrong people or you didn't give them the time and budget to do the right thing. It would be like doing development without QA. So of course, speaking of our QA, we have user testing. This should always happen before engineering writes a line of code, because it doesn't make sense for you guys to build stuff if people hate it, and if it's flawed, and if it's not working. I'd like to save you some time and save our customers some pain. So things always go to user testing, and when it finds flaws, because it always does, that means we cycle back, just like you would in your QA cycles back to interaction design so that we can improve on it and hopefully test it again. So that's a short version of that. Let's talk quickly about Lean, since I hear a lot about Lean and Lean UX. So this is another poll. If anybody, if all 5 of you want to get involved in this poll, this question is, minimum viable product. There's a lot of talk about that. Which is the minimum viable jogging outfit? Because UX is typically fighting with engineers and product on how lean do we go. Typically, product and engineering want to do the absolute least thing we can put out and just ship it, but UX is typically battling them. And so I want to see where you guys feel. Thank you, 4 people. Oh, they're neck and neck. Come on. Who's going to win the race? So typically, when I show this, the most votes go to jogger number 1, as probably, and somebody always votes for number 3, and they're like, check me out. I'm super cool. I voted for 3 as minimum viable jogging outfit. Well, good. I hope you're wearing that. I'm sure it's very safe and good for sunblock. But I usually find that people vote for the first one the most because it's viable, and minus the hat, it's pretty minimal. But UX would say the middle one, and that's because we want to make sure that what we release has real customer value, that we're not just giving people the smallest thing we could just to scrape by, that we're giving something really strong. It doesn't have to be a full version 1, but you never get a second chance to make a first impression, which was the slogan of a TV commercial from my childhood. It was like, oh, you have dandruff, you're never going to make a good impression on anyone. It was this 1970s commercial. So remember, you don't get a second chance to make a first impression, and that's really true for when people are using websites and apps. Think about your own behavior. How many times have you seen a website or an app and uninstalled it? And then when they came out with a new release, did you try it again? Or did you say, forget about those guys? No, this guy in the green hoodie is shaking his head no. He knows we don't do this. So when you lose somebody, you probably have lost them for good. So UX is always concerned that if we go too lean, we might be running the risk that people think, hey, we're bad at building stuff. We build incomplete, broken things. And so you want to make sure, that's why I always suggest that UX collaborate with product and everybody really early on to make sure that we're finding the right balance between features and leanness. So UX would say MVP stands for the minimum valuable product. Viable, I don't know if anyone remembers the cartoon from many years ago, minimum viable pants. As you might imagine, minimum viable pants looked a little bit like that jogger. So it's not so much about viability, it's about value. And the customer value is also that product market fit. So we have to make sure we're delivering something that's meaningful to customers. Otherwise, they'll be happy to tweet about how much they hate you, and then your company has a problem. And take it from Eric, Mr. Lean. Even if you're not doing lean, it's still some good advice. Because what if we found ourselves building something nobody wanted? Well, in that case, who cares if we did it on time and on budget? And if you go too lean, you might be building something nobody wants. So just a heads up there. Now we're going to talk about Agile, which means please buckle your seatbelts. Your seatbelt goes into the receptacle this way. I should get a seatbelt and a flotation device. I'm going to be talking a little bit more about, I'm going to lean on SAFe a little bit more because they're such a fantastically easy target. But what I say is really adaptable to any method of software development, since UX is going to be UX no matter what, but we can adapt to whatever you guys are doing. So of course, this is a screenshot of the fantastically easy to figure out SAFe Agile methodology. And I took 4 days of SAFe training in 2014, and I have since recovered. Thank you for asking. And when I took the training, I asked them many times, where does UX fit into your model? And they said, oh, we don't know. They said, if you figure it out, please tell us. And I died a little, and I wrote to them last year and I said, I figured it out and I'm going to tour the world telling people, and you guys are getting it wrong. And they kind of acted like, well, maybe I need to read more books about things. So thanks for the mansplaining, but they didn't want to hear it, and so I'm going to just tour the world and tell everybody they're wrong. So now, as of a year or so ago, UX now gets a little recycle your garbage icon in this left bar of castaway meaningless things. I mean, not that they're meaningless, but they're obviously in the sidebar of things we haven't figured out yet, or we don't know where these go. Like lean UX, how is that in a box with system team, roadmap, shared services, and metrics? This seems to be the island of castaways. And so they haven't figured it out. And when I show this to people, they typically say, well, SAFe is a joke. And I say, well, maybe or maybe not. I'm still hoping we'll be friends again someday. But it definitely doesn't tell me, you, or anybody how UX works into software development, or who these people are and what they're doing. Are they on a team? Are they not on a team? So I'm going to cover that. But of course, SAFe said to itself, hold my beer. Did that meme make it here? Hold my beer? Yes? No? Kind of? Okay, that guy's smiling. So SAFe says to itself, hold my beer. And they also said on their website that traditionally UX experts were in charge of the design process. Well, right there, that sounds pretty good to me. Let's put UX experts in charge of the design process. Can't think of anyone better, but they make this sound bad. And they say that they've decided, you can read on their website, that you don't need UX experts anymore at all. They should be removed from the process, and they are empowering lean agile, they're empowering agile teams to do lean UX themselves. Which, of course, I also died a little again. I keep dying. But this is my favorite part. They recommend that you get the design perspectives of product management, system architecture, business owners, information security, operations, and shared services. So it sounds like everybody will be collaborating on the design of the product except product designers. That's brilliant. The only conclusion I can come up to at this point is someone at SAFe had a really bad breakup with a UX specialist, and they're getting their revenge. That's my best bet. So my favorite part here is SAFe says if you have an eye for this and a feel for this, that, yeah, you could just do UX. Any agile team can do it. And those words are really there to minimize UX, because you wouldn't say your cardiologist just has an eye for the human heart and a feel. You wouldn't say your best coder just has a feel for working with programming languages. These can come off a bit disrespectful. But this is here so that anyone who self-assesses as I have an eye for design and a feel for user interaction, well, I guess I can do UX work. I guess the specialty training isn't important. So, where does UX belong, especially in a model like this? First of all, nobody puts UX in the corner. Did anyone see Dirty Dancing? Did that movie make it here? Maybe. One person. Not of the right age. So, nobody puts UX in the corner. Please, you've got to find a better place for us. So where do we live? Well, we're here in Portfolio, prioritizing what we're going to be doing, working along with product and other people on that. We are in continuous exploration to continuously explore the market and user needs and make sure we're prioritizing features and releases that meet, if not exceed, user needs. We are certainly all about customer solutions. It's what UX lives for. And of course, we want to make DevOps better. We'd like to improve and enhance the culture. We would like to see, we would like to decrease failure rates, but we tend to be thinking more on the human experience level than on the bug and technical level. And of course, we would love for there to be fewer fixes. I'm sure you guys would love to be making fewer fixes too. So I say better UX design earlier, fewer fixes later. And of course, we are on the team. One UX designer should be on the Agile team. Now, that doesn't mean you have to add to the Agile team a graphic designer and a copywriter and lots of other people. It's typically recommended, at least where I've worked, what I've seen work well is one UX person is on the Agile team. They represent all of the creative team. So the visual designers, the copywriters, and all of those people represented by the UX person on the Agile team. And that means we can be sprinting along with you. If you're doing sprint, if you're doing Kanban, fine for us too. That works even better in some cases. So again, the model that I've seen works best, and not everyone agrees with me on this, but the model that I've seen work best at the places where I've been is this one, where UX is cycling through their processes first, and then once it's looking and testing well, then UX has the visual designers visually design it. Now that confuses some people. A lot of people think UX designers are artists. Why isn't this thing getting art right away? I'm not an artist. I'm a terrible artist. I am a UX specialist. I have a degree in music. Thank you. So that is why clients call me Mary Poppins, because I fly in, fix everything, sing a few songs, and fly away to where I'm needed next. We're not all artists, and I always recommend playing to people's strengths. So UX first, then the art. If it's beautiful, but customers hate it, then it didn't matter that it was beautiful, and we burned artists' time on something we now have to change anyway. So I recommend things going in this direction, in this order, and then of course moving things down to engineering so that we're preparing for what engineering will be building. Usually UX needs to be 2 or more sprints ahead because we tend to have research and testing that take time. But, wrong direction. Oop. Oh. I was going to skip that one, sorry. So, what's in a UX sprint? Everything I told you about before. Done. Secret revealed. So also, I suggest that engineering get some tech debt into the backlog, because just like sometimes a sprint goes a little bit wrong for you guys, where QA finds more bugs than expected, or estimates weren't right, or somebody was sick, things can certainly be thrown off for UX as well. I'm excellent at estimating, but sometimes things come up. And that's why I recommend that instead of engineering sitting around doing this or calling up my manager to say how mad they are that my testing took a little longer, have some stuff in the backlog that you can then work on while I need a little bit more time. Let's not create conflict if we don't have to. So remember our Agile Manifesto Principles. A few of them are very relevant to working with UX. The first one would be our highest priority is to satisfy the customer. And of course we do that by getting easy to learn, easy to use, life-improving product to them as soon as we can. Principle 5, give motivated individuals the environment and support that they need and trust them to get the job done. Please hire great UX specialists. Please fire terrible people who said they were UX specialists but aren't, and trust everybody to get the job done. Number 9, continuous attention to technical excellence and good design enhances agility. Well, I would just say good design sounds good, but let's make it great design. And my personal favorite, hands up, who else has this as anyone have a personal favorite Agile Manifesto Principle? Or is it just me? But my favorite is number 10, simplicity, the art of maximizing the amount of work not done is essential. And UX often shows up and says, we shouldn't build that. Why are we building that? That has no customer value. Oh, well, the CEO wants it. Don't care. He's not the one paying us to continue having jobs. So it's important to allow UX to come in, hopefully early, more in the planning and portfolio stages, and kill projects or pivot projects or evolve projects so that we can be following through on that promise. So that means when people ask me, how do you work UX into a company that is really trying to stick with the safe agile model, the answer is you can't follow safe agile and do UX at the same time, since SAFE has decided to vote UX off the island. So if you are trying to do the SAFE model, I recommend that you just ignore what they say about UX, because it's quite bizarre. So sometimes I get, hey, it sounds like UX is big design up front, and we decided we're getting away from big design up front, and aren't you just recommending big design up front? And I say, well, let's talk about it. So imagine your company has a process where you've got a 5-step sign up, where people sign up, they pick something, they pay for something, and they're done. Now, when engineering goes to build this, they can separate this into 5 buckets of work, or maybe even more pieces and buckets, because they hopefully have documentation, information, wireframes on how the whole thing's going to look, and they can consider the whole thing when they're building it. But not true for UX. We don't get the story up front. We have to write the story. We're getting pain points, requests, customer feedback, innovation ideas. And so we have to write the story. We have to come up with what it's going to look like. We might not know what step 5 looks like until we get to designing it. But the most important thing to consider is that the smallest piece for us is the user's entire workflow. We can't just design step 1, give it to engineering, you guys build it. We design step 2, give it to engineering, you guys build it. Because if we then test the whole user process, because these wouldn't be tested in isolation, it's tested as a step-by-step process. If we then find out that it's broken, do you guys want to rebuild? Because we had this process of giving you these pieces, that's not going to save time, money, or sanity. That's going to make you hate us, and that's going to be bad. Did anyone see this viral video? I don't have the video, I just have a screenshot from it. So it's obviously a motion-activated or sensor-based soap dispenser, and someone installed it right over a power socket. So the soap dispensing works, the power socket works, but when you go to plug something in, you are covered in soap just before you connect to live electricity. I think that's great. And the caption was, this is what happens when you do unit testing without integration testing. But I think of it as, this is why UX designs and tests complete workflows rather than separate pieces in isolation. Because we too have to do the testing, and it's important for us to test the entire workflow and not hand you guys what are essentially unfinished pieces. And of course, if the project or the need or the ticket is something small, of course UX can be nimble and move quickly on it. But for something new or larger, we're just going to have to say the smallest unit for UX in that case is a user's complete workflow. And I was asked, why doesn't UX do fast feedback and iterate? And I say, we want to, but people don't give us the time and the budget. So before telling UX they are super bad dogs for not doing fast feedback and iterating, check if we got the time and budget to do it, because usually we didn't. And I'd like to see that improved. Okay, so quick things on the importance of incorporating UX in the process. I don't know if anyone recognizes who this is, but I'm not allowed to say who this is. This is just a famous piece of chat software that did a redesign in 2017, and then in 2018 had to admit publicly and in their blog that their redesign was a failure and that they were going to have to redesign the redesign. They had to admit that this was cluttered, hard to navigate, lacking simplicity. People hated it. It had features they didn't like, want, or need, and now they're going to have to redo it. And what do you think that cost them to build that for multiple platforms, test and release it? Millions of dollars internally, tens of millions, and now they're going to have to redo it and throw some of this away or start again. And so the question there is, how could we have known that this was going to be such a failure? And the answer is, that's usually UX's job. So I don't work at that company where that that disaster was, but my guess would be that somebody just kind of went around UX and said, well, we have a great idea to make this thing look like Snapchat, let's just run with it. And they didn't do the research and testing that UX would have done. So we can know up front. You don't have to just build it, just ship it, and find out later it's a disaster. We can save ourselves internal problems, and we can certainly save customers agony when we incorporate that full UX process and make sure, if nothing else, UX team is saving people from disasters. So this was a slide quickly about UX. Some people say, well, we can't afford UX, and my thought is you can't afford not to use UX, but I'll just blow through this one to move on to some other stuff. So obviously there's a lot of reasons where UX can pay for itself, and but typically this might not be something that the engineers are worried so much about. Maybe more engineering managers could be talking about this, but lots of great reasons to incorporate UX, and for what UX is being paid, we more than pay for ourselves. And this looks like a poll. Who wants to take a poll? Come on, can I get 5 of you to be awake and take a poll? So this poll is going to be about how likely are each of these things to drive away a customer? So there's a few different things going on here on the screen. They'll be on your poll screen. So again, menti.com, 88752. You can take the poll. Or you watching at home in a week on the video. Take the poll, and I want to see what you think of each of these things. How do they affect the customer's experience of your product or your company? Are they things the customer really doesn't care about, or are they things that might drive the customer to leave us? Because that would be bad. We kind of want the customer to stay. It gets really expensive to try to win them over a second time. 5 people. We did it. We did it. Who else? 6. Oh, a new record for you guys. So pretty much every time I run this, the polling looks the same. So thank you for falling right into my evil trap. So basically, this shows that you know that the top 4 things are important. That poor UX can drive customers away. But that internal troubles, like inefficiencies, well, certainly that's not good. Nobody's happy about that. And it does affect the customer in that they might have to wait a little bit longer for the next release. But it shows that you understand that giving customers a poor user experience can drive them away. So it helps drive home that point of really working with specialists and not giving it to the Agile team to do their own lean UX and not giving it to a junior graphic designer. Hey, and it's measurable. I hope that when you have your UX revolution that you will measure it, because these things are measurable. For example, we should be measuring a lot of things relating to customer satisfaction. So we can measure things like customer service, call center, social media. Are we seeing fewer complaints, better app reviews, higher app ratings, fewer support tickets, fewer call center calls? If you have a tool that measures the semantics of social posts, we would want to see posts about your company or product being more positive. We can also look at more app installs, fewer uninstalls. Are people spending more? Obviously, depending upon what you're doing, this might be a little more relevant to shopping, retail, or e-commerce, but even if you're selling services, it could be, are they tending to upgrade or buying more? And of course, if they're coming to a site or app, are they tending to convert more? So these are all things and improvements that can be measured that typically improve once UX is brought into the picture correctly. And back to our DevOps goals, these should also be measurable as well once you've got UX playing a more important role. For example, how long do stories, projects, or epics take to get to market? I would also imagine that once engineers are working from great UX prototypes or wireframes, I prefer prototypes, that the estimation might be more accurate. That instead of working from user stories or something the product manager told me, we can then work from real blueprints, and that would make estimation more accurate. And of course, if UX is providing these blueprints and they're being followed, then hopefully there are fewer surprise changes and rebuilds. And also, we want to get releases out to the public more quickly or more often, but we still want to focus on getting the right product out to the customer, because nobody wants to continuously deploy junk. And of course, we can measure internal communication and collaboration, but that's going to be something more for managers to discuss with people to make sure that their situations are improving. And we can improve these things. So this quote popped up recently, and it seemed very relevant. Not everybody is a designer, but everybody has to have the user as their North Star. Day-to-day collaboration between engineering and design is the only way to get thoughtful designs into final release in an agile fashion. So let's say you're on a project and you've got a specialized back-end database programmer who is the bottleneck right now. There's just too many things calling for this person's attention. So what do? Well, you could try pair programming. You could build a skills matrix so that you're better prepared for this next time, but that's next time. You could do some exploratory testing so developers get feedback earlier, and you might even have to just add another programmer to the team. But nobody recommends that the specialized programmer teach his or her specialty to the rest of the team. That's pretty much never recommended. However, I read a book about Scrum, and the book said your UX designer is probably going to be a bottleneck, so have her teach her job to everybody on the team. And I died a little again. Who remembers the 1970s? Was anyone alive other than me? 1970s? No, I'm getting some no's. Okay, one. Thanks, guy. Then I owe you a drink. Decaf with soy milk. But yes, I owe it to you anyway. So in the late 70s, I was put in a class to learn how to program BASIC on a Commodore PET. Anybody? BASIC? Commodore PET? Did that make it here? So obviously, I'm an amazing programmer, right? With my degree in music and my background in opera, I'm probably one of your best programmers, surely. So, of course, if you have a bottleneck in programming, you're going to want to teach me your job, right? You're going to want to teach me some Ruby or some Java so that I can code to production, yes? Or maybe you'll send me to a 3-day boot camp. That must be it. I must need a 3-day boot camp so that I can learn how to code to production. Now, when I say that, obviously you guys die a little inside and you go, oh my God, I don't want this musician UX chick writing code. Somebody get her out of here. And we feel the same way about when people are trying to do UX's job. And that hurts culture as well, because it's just another place where people say, as we saw from the poll in the beginning, anybody can do your job, you know, you just make wireframes. And so that hurts culture, because that's not true for us, and it leads to conflict. And a quick side note, I've seen lots of conference sessions at the engineering places where I'm speaking, and somebody always wants to teach engineers to do UX. And quick note, you can't learn to do UX in an hour conference session. If you could, I'd be teaching it to you, but you really can't. And just heads up, at all the UX conferences I go to, nobody shows up and says they're going to give you a 1-hour seminar on coding, and you're going to be able to go back to your job and write code. So just know it doesn't work. Don't buy the book. But please do incorporate UX into your trouble and ticketing system. This is one of the best ways to collaborate with UX. If you have a question or a problem, I want to know about it. And Slack might not be the best place. It can be a good place, but it's not the only place. And if we want to have good documentation, then get UX into whatever you're using for your tickets. That means if you're using Jira, don't start a Trello board for your UX tickets. Bring us into your system and assign your tickets to us. I'll be telling a story later today. My keynote is a storytelling keynote. I'll be telling you a bizarre story of what happened when I got assigned to some tickets and then thrown off the project, but not unassigned from the tickets. So that got super interesting. But yes, please do bring us into your system. I love when I get tickets, and to me, that's the highest priority thing in my day. If I'm working on something really important and an engineer assigns a ticket to me, I stop everything, because I know I'm their bottleneck until I answer that. And I hope more of your UX collaborators are feeling the same way. I'm going to tell them to do it, so hopefully they'll listen. Wrong way. Aha. Also, please invite your UX teammate to all of your meetings, your retros, your plannings, your showcases. And I know you feel like, well, showcase, that's where I'm just going to show some code and everyone's going to slap me on the back. Still have UX there, because if something comes up about, well, why did we build this? What's the customer value? Why didn't we build it this other way? These are questions that the UX specialist should field. Please don't answer for them. Don't show their work for them. You wouldn't want me to demo your code. Unless it's in BASIC, written in 1979. That will look familiar then. Do you still use line numbers? No. Okay, so make sure you're inviting UX to everything because, again, they are part of the team. Treat them like they're part of the team. Don't throw them out. Broken eggs. I don't know. Do you ever see something broken in something you're building and someone says, "Oh, we'll fix it later"? Has anyone ever heard that? Does anyone want to admit to having said that? We'll fix it later. And then does it get fixed later? Anyone? No, man with hoodie says no. And he's right. So, of course, this is very serious for us UX people. If we can see the train wreck coming, we can't understand why we want to continue having the train wreck. So if we see that there's UX or technical debt up front, especially UX debt, we want to fix it as soon as possible. And we would hope engineers would be our partners and collaborators in that versus saying, well, it's broken now, but we'll put it in the backlog, we'll fix it another time. It doesn't get fixed later. And I can stand up here and tell you, as long as this day is, that UX is an important part of this complete breakfast, and that it's important to get us involved early and at every step for collaboration and product and portfolio. But this is a screenshot of the smallest flowchart in the world. Has anyone seen this? It's been going around LinkedIn. I don't know if it has made it to Germany. This is from a document released by the U.S. Department of Defense, as in the U.S. military. Released a document in October called How to Detect BS in Agile. Do people know what BS is? Would anyone like to give a nice German translation of BS? Am I going to be the only one who has to say it out loud and on a video? It's English for bullshit. So is that Scheiße? Yeah. Okay, so our government actually wrote a document about how to detect poop in Agile because they're finding so many contractors and people are saying, yeah, I do Agile, we do Agile. And then they're finding they really don't. And you can actually find this document online. It is public. And this is a screenshot from the flowchart telling you how to recognize Agile bullshit. And I know it's a little hard to read, so I'm going to read you a couple of my favorite diamonds here. So let's see. One is, are teams delivering working software to at least some subset of real users every iteration, including the first, and gathering feedback? And the gathering feedback is so key, especially to the UX process, as you saw from how important research is. Is feedback from users turned into concrete work items for sprint teams on timelines shorter than 1 month? Which kind of backs up my broken egg. Don't put this in the backlog and get to it next year. We've got to make sure that if there is feedback that leads us to fixes or changes, that we're really truly doing those quickly. And of course, my favorite, are teams empowered to change the requirements based on user feedback? Well, of course, this is my favorite one. If we start building junk and we get the feedback that this is junk, which we should be receiving in user testing and not after we've built and deployed it and released it, well then, we should be able to circle back and say, maybe these are the wrong requirements. Maybe this is the wrong thing to build. Well, let's not continue on this crappy path. So if any of these is no, you have Agile BS. So says the American military, and this is probably the only thing we can trust them on right now. So find this document. It's a real hoot. It's about 3 pages long. It's really short, but it's questions you can ask people who claim to be Agile to see if they really are. So a quick thing about process. Again, before the project kicks off and the budget is requested, it's important to involve UX for any of you who may be Agile coaches or more involved on the product or portfolio side. It's important to get UX involved early. UX isn't just something you throw on later like, we'll slap purple on that. We get involved the whole way, and especially before project kickoff. If you want engineers to have something to build at kickoff, we have to have already been working. We don't have a time machine. I'm so sorry. I keep asking Elon Musk. We don't have it. And I also suggest, this is my model, so some people may disagree, but I also suggest that there be waves of collaboration. That initially UX workers will collaborate with people in their own department, which are typically other creative copywriters and visual designers and other UX people will be collaborating there first. Then we'll bring it to a product manager and say, does this match vision, requirements? Are we going in the right direction? Did we miss anything? And if that looks good, then we might bring it to engineering. Now, that doesn't mean you'll never see it or you're seeing it at the end. It just means you might not be the first people we're collaborating with, but I recommend very strongly using swear words to all the UX people that I meet that we must collaborate with engineering very frequently. I like to have meetings with them at least once a week and more often if I'm working on something that's going through a lot of changes. And then finally, we might take it to a larger team, so at a showcase or lean triad or stakeholders, but I don't really like to show stuff to them until I know that engineering's cool with it, product's cool with it. I don't want to show it because stakeholders fall in love with crap so fast, and I don't want them to fall in love with the wrong thing. I don't want them to fall in love with something and then have my engineering team say, we can't build that. Build something different. In closing, you'll find a lot of books, videos, conference presentations and internal documents saying, hey, we've got this new way to do things, and magically it always seems to exclude UX specialists or make it sound like someone else can do the UX work. And I just find that there are lots of companies trying these things and ultimately they don't work. And so I say, hey, none of these are UX to a UX expert. And so it's time to try something different. Try it again, but this time we've got to thoroughly and correctly incorporate good UX specialists. So we want the bed of the hospital to be empty because the patient recovered, not because the patient has passed. And so if your DevOps is in the ICU, UX can hopefully help you get it out by improving the universe for engineers. And please talk to managers and leadership about how we can hopefully improve product collaboration, communication, processes, all kinds of things by getting UX more integrated. And every time I do this talk, some engineer comes up to me afterwards and says, well, you know, all this bad blood between UX and engineers, it's UX's fault. And I go, well, thank you for that. So let's stop pointing fingers. It doesn't matter how we got here. It only matters that we're allies and teammates from here on in. So pinky swear with me. And of course, the path to getting out of the hospital and improving your DevOps results and having better product and happy customers is to find those fresh new ways to work with UX. So that actually finishes that. We do have a few minutes. I'm happy to take questions. This is normally where people tell me their horror stories about how much they've hated working with UX. And when I hear how bad your UX person is, I typically tell you to fire them. But we can. I'm happy to take those. I don't think we have a mic, but we do have a small room. You're welcome to contact me. Also, I'm certainly reachable. And if anybody liked the short version, I've got a long version. And then I'm working on the companion book if people like words on paper or on a Kindle. Did Kindle make it here? So anybody have any questions? Anybody want to battle me on anything I said? Any thoughts? Anyone awake? Anyone need that 5th cup of coffee? Or is this a shy culture? I don't know. I've gone to some places where people are like, no questions. Or I answered everything. I answered everything you could ever possibly ask. No, yes?
You put all the tickets, or the UX tickets, on the normal Kanban board of the engineering team?
It depends. I actually have seen it a couple of ways. I've seen people incorporate them in with the engineering because obviously whatever we do eventually gets moved over to you. In that case, I sometimes feel like we might, sometimes an extra column might make sense. Like sometimes I feel like creative needs its own column so people understand that it's in progress in another universe. But I've seen it both ways. Where I'm working right now, I'm using a separate board for UX and UI and copy, and then we're moving my stuff over to a separate engineering one. So I don't think I could say there's one right way to do. It's more that where I am now, they want all of their tickets and boards in GitHub and ZenHub, and I'm using something called AHA. I don't know if people are familiar with AHA. It's kind of a strategic and tactical look at product management and features and releases, and so I'm using that to run UX and product, and so they didn't want to come into my system, and it doesn't make sense for me to try to operate in GitHub because it's not really made for what I do. So I don't think there's one right way there. Sorry. But I'll tell you how I'm doing it now. Anything else? I will be here all day, and I'll be speaking again at 2:30 on something different. So it's not a rerun of this. Tell your friends it's fresh and new. Tweet that it's fresh and new. It will be. It's called Let's Not Congratulate Ourselves Just Yet. And it's the misadventures of working in a place that thought it was really lean and agile, but was really a giant disaster. Well, I'll be here if you need me. Otherwise, I'll just be kind of enjoying the hot microphone and singing karaoke, so she should probably stop the video. But thanks for dropping by. See you later.